is interesting when we understand that about Paul, because he is an extremely intelligent man. Extremely. He knew how to speak to crowds. He was trained in this. When we actually see him in Athens and he goes up to Mars Hill, he knows how to speak in a proper way in relation to man's methods. And he spoke well. But yet, what did they do? They rejected him as soon as he got to the resurrection of Christ. They were fine with everything else, but they rejected him as soon as he got to the resurrection of Christ because they didn't want that. So he very clearly states here that it's not something that he actually received from men. He received it from God and a direct revelation from God. Now, as we pick back up in chapter 2, so we're in Galatians chapter 2 and starting in verse 1, he then goes on to talk about the fact then, because he went out to Arabia for 3 years, he came back to Damascus. At that time, he was actually speaking and proclaiming that Christ is actually the Messiah. They tried to kill him, so he got chased out of there. And then he ended up ultimately back in Tarsus, was where his hometown for a while. And then he goes on to describe here, then after 14 years, I went up again to Jerusalem with Barnabas and also took Titus with me. So it's 14 years later that he actually does this. And the reason that they are doing this is because there were certain men who came from Judea. These men from Judea came into Antioch teaching that you have to be circumcised. Now, this is over in Acts chapter 15 and verse 1. So Galatians directly relates to Acts chapter 15. As a matter of fact, Acts chapter 15 happens just before Galatians is written and why he is actually writing it in response to this. Okay, so in Acts chapter 15 and verse 1, and certain men came down from Judea and taught the brethren, unless you are circumcised according to the custom of Moses, you cannot be saved. So they're not ones who are denying that Christ died for your sins and he was raised from the dead, but they're saying actual salvation comes by being obedient to Moses.